In this research video, I want to talk to you a little bit about choosing a research topic. This week you're going to be asked to jump into trying to figure out what you want to write your larger research paper on in this class and to do some exploring about that topic. And so this video should help you if you're finding that you're sort of stuck, and also giving you a sense of what I hope you get out of this assignment overall. So I thought I would start by sharing some results from some research that was done. PIL, Project Information Literacy, is a scholarly endeavor where researchers look at how students gather information and engage in the research process. And in this particular study, conducted in 2013, some of the results that they found were that students tended to feel fairly frustrated with the research process. In fact, the majority of students said that research was more difficult for them at this point in, say, their college careers than it had been for them before, say, in high school. So if you're feeling kind of frustrated or don't know where to start, you're in good company. Another thing they found was that students didn't utilize all of the information resources available to them. In fact, they tend to use a very small set of, tools that exist in their information landscape. So, for instance, while students are pretty good at using Google, they rarely talk to a librarian if they have a question about finding resources. But librarians are one of the key tools that you might utilize in a research process, even though students are rarely utilize that. So one of the things we'll talk a little bit later about in this video is thinking about a variety of different kinds of sources and how you might utilize those in your research process. And the last thing I wanted to draw your attention to as results from this particular research was that 66% of students said that finding a topic or defining a topic was the most difficult part of the research process. So if you find yourself not knowing what to do, you aren't alone, and in the next few slides I'm going to give you some tips about thinking about how you might be able to figure that part out. So I cannot stress enough that probably the most important aspect of finding a topic is just to be curious about your world. You know, I think on an everyday basis, if you're like me, you probably ask a ton of questions about things that you encounter. You might not ask these out loud, but they might be the kinds of things that run through your head, like, I wonder why that commercial chose to use that music, or that voiceover in, creating this ad. Or I wonder why people are so willing to accept certain ideas within society. These kinds of questions that run through your head are very often the basis of great research projects. The questions come from a variety of resources, and so I encourage you to mine your own life for the topics that you might choose in this class or any of your research classes. More than anything else, a research topic should be something you are curious about, you care about. So for instance, you might think about the hobbies that you're involved in. Do you love music or sports or art? What kinds of questions might come up for you, or ideas? What are you curious about in these areas or fields? Perhaps some questions emerge from things that you've recently read, whether they be books or magazines, blogs, news sources, or things that you've seen, movies that you've watched, news programs that you've encountered, or even other classes that you've taken at BSU or on other campuses, topics that have come up that have sparked your curiosity about something. These are great places to look for topic ideas. As you've already seen, just looking through communication journals, browsing through those can also be a place where you see what kinds of research topics might be available. So you were asked to do just that in a previous assignment. And one of the things that I mentioned then was the ways in which communication research, and many of you noticed, was the ways in which communication research in particular is widely varied. I mean, really tons of things can be studied from communication perspective. It is a very interdisciplinary subject area, so it has relationships to all kinds of different subjects or topics that you might be interested in. So I like to tell students that in communication studies, I guess one of the perhaps frustrating things is that anything, when you're thinking about a topic you want to study, almost anything can be studied. But that also can be what's pretty exciting about being in the communication field. And so one of the ways to think about how you can take almost anything you're interested in and sort of tweak it to be coming from a communication perspective is to ask, how does this topic relate to issues of meaning and meaning construction or meaning making in society or in a culture? Or how does this topic relate to the creation of messages or the reception of messages in some way? Or how does the topic relate to interactions, how individuals interact and relate to one another? If you think about those things, you can take almost any topic and really make it work for you in the communication field. So by way of example, I'll just note that, many students tend to be interested in sports. And I had one student recently who talked to me about being interested in the recent debate and discussion about concussions in the arena of football. Now, to approach concussions as how does the sport of football lead to brain deterioration, to ask that kind of question is not a communication question. That really fits in the world of medicine or, cognitive sciences in some way. We aren't equipped as communications scholars to study, what are the medical effects of concussions on football players. But that does not mean that you couldn't examine some aspects of that issue through a communication lens. So for instance, I could ask questions or follow the direction of something like thinking about, well, how is this debate itself? How is the issue of concussions presented to the public through, say, news articles? How do authors discuss this issue of concussions, frame this issue of concussions in these news products? Do they present it as still open-ended? Do they present this as an unequivocal truth that we know football will lead to concussions? Do they lament, this sport as being kind of tragic and leading to, the demise of individuals? Or do they present it as, an unfortunate side effect, but something we're willing to, deal with, I guess? How is it constructed? What are the meanings that are presented to us about concussions in the world of sports journalism? We could also ask questions about, how do audiences feel about this? Particularly fans, So fans, when they're faced with this growing research that says concussions are part of this sport that they love, how do they rectify that, right? How do they think about it? Does it make it harder for them to be fans of the sport? Is it something they just try to ignore? So asking that question about how audiences receive these messages is a question about communication. Lastly, we could even make it about interaction. We could ask questions about how the athletes themselves, sort of how this might change, right? The growing information about concussions. Does this change how they relate to the industry or to management? Does it shape how they negotiate health benefits, for instance, with their union and with the owners? While we wouldn't study the medical effects of concussions on football players in the field of communication studies, there are a lot of ways in which something like even the concussion debate could be turned into communication topics. Another thing that I think is helpful and useful when thinking about communication topics is to recognize the difference between a research topic and a research question. So you may have had research papers before where they say, come up with a research question. And while research questions are very important to the research process, it would be premature to ask you to have a research question at this point in the game. So what we're going to explore in this class, and what I'm asking you to do in this class, is to have a topic. Oftentimes you have to, and we're still at the stage of sort of exploring that topic before you got to the place where you could ask a good research question. So research topics tend to be open-ended and general. They give you a kind of direction that will guide you in finding resources and information. But the point of that is to lead you to a place where you can really examine what are scholars saying about this topic in this area. How have they researched this topic in the past? What have they found out? What do they know? Unless I know what that conversation looks like, I can't really ask a very good research question. And so in this course, we'll really be hanging out at in this area, looking at finding resources that help you get a picture of what a scholarly conversation looks like. In your 300 level research and writing classes and your 400 level research writing classes, you would be able to use this information in order to construct a more specific and directed research question. This kind of question doesn't just give you a direction, but it gives you a plan that allows you to collect data and evidence in order to investigate on your own a particular, some aspect of the topic that you're interested in. So it's important to recognize that research topics and questions aren't quite the same thing, but research topics should guide the development of a research question. At the end of the semester, we'll, try out, what might a research question in your topic area look like. But for now, we're really working in the area of research topics. And so as we explore a research topic, it's important to know that different resources are available to you in developing that sense of, what's going on here. Most of us have some idea. If you've picked a topic that you're interested in, you've already started to do some of this work. You've maybe had conversations with your friends or with colleagues or with professors about a certain topic that help you form a background of information on this. Maybe you've looked up local news or read local news stories or even Googled something to understand a topic better, or used reference resources to help you build a foundation of knowledge. These are really important steps in coming to have a better understanding about a topic, even though none of these resources are likely to be cited in your research paper. But without developing this background information, you can't jump into looking at scholarly studies and be expected to really understand what they're saying. And so in the assignment you're asked to complete for me this week, it's really about helping you to develop this foundational knowledge so that when you jump into looking at more scholarly resources, you have a better starting place from which to understand them. So by way of example, my daughter was recently diagnosed with allergies, dust mite allergies. It's been a real pain for me. But I wanted to learn more about this, but I didn't just jump in and look at, what are medical scientists saying about this? Instead, I went to a lot of other resources. I talked with her doctor. I talked with my sister, who's a nurse. I, of course, Googled this. I looked stuff up on reference resources to find out and have a vocabulary and a better understanding of allergies in general, what I could do about them, how I could approach this. After that, I did go and look up some more specific reference resources to help me build that understanding. The last thing I just want to make mention of is the way in which doing this process can help you develop a better vocabulary for how researchers study a topic area. So in doing that background information, I also come to learn what is the particularized vocabulary that researchers use and what kind of subject areas might this topic relate to.